Our correspondent, Benga Asher, trying to distill in about 5 minutes the events of the political world in Nigeria that transpired in the year 2021. Well, we have one of the actors here, at least someone who benefited from some of the actions that went on in the political sphere in 2021. Right here in our Abuja studios is Mr. Debo Ologunagba, who is the National Publicity Secretary of the People's Democratic Party. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me, Malcolm.
A pretty eventful year it's been for you and your party, you'd say?
Yeah, absolutely.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
Well, we'll come to you shortly. I will be posing questions, but you're not going to be alone on this conversation. We also have in our Lagos studios Professor Olajumoke Yakob Haliso, who's the Dean School of Social Sciences at Babcock University, a lecturer of political science in Babcock University, and also visiting professor, Rappaport Center for Human Rights and Justice in Austin. Madam, you're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you very much for having me. It's my pleasure.
Oh, my apologies. I see you're joining us via Zoom in Ogun State. I thought that you were right in our Lagos studios. Well, you're welcome to the program nonetheless. I'm sure you have been watching the year 2021 with very keen interest and, wondering what's going to happen in 2022, especially with the Electoral Act still hanging in the balance somewhat. How would you assess the events of 2021?
Thank you very much, Maupe. And just to take a moment to commend you and the Sunrise Daily team for the great job you've been doing with this program over the years. I'm a fan, to put it mildly. Now, 2021 on the political scene in Nigeria has been a train wreck. One would find it really difficult to pinpoint any positive news to celebrate. It has been a year of great uncertainty. It has been a year of great confusion. The political landscape is perhaps even less clear at the end of 2021 than at the beginning of it, so to speak, because as the report that was shown earlier repeats or reminds us, there are so many unsettled challenges for our country, many of which are not new, have persisted over time. And I think the second thing about 2021 politically is that we have not learned from the past and we have not prepared for the future. So for me, those are the two things that stand out. If I wanted to summarize in a few words, the experience politically in 2021 this year, there is almost no good news. Leadership has not gotten better. Security has worsened. Political parties are still largely in disarray. There is uncertainty about the upcoming elections. And by this time, normally we should know how those elections will be conducted, both the off-season elections in 2022 and the general elections in 2023. As it is, we still have no clue what is going to happen because the electoral bill has not been concluded. And of course, politicians are still busy pursuing their personal interests at the expense of the Nigerian citizen and at the expense of Nigerian democracy. Cross-carpeting continues, and we expect much more in the year to come. We know that the fact that the two major parties are currently experiencing challenges means that there will also be, in the coming year, a lot of what we may call ungodly coalitions and ungodly ungodly linkages between these politicians. What worries me is that it seems for Nigeria 2021 shows us that we are taking 2 steps forward and 5 steps backward all the time. Permit me to pause here to allow you to continue with the interview. I'll speak more later.
Well, I do not know if our political actors will agree with you in terms of what you've just described in terms of the uncertainty in this fair. But some people will say that perhaps one of the parties seems to have faced the issues which it had within its own party, for instance, the PDP. And I'm using that as an instance because the PDP publicity secretary is here and perhaps they'll have that as a defense. I do not know what you make of how the PDP has how they've handled their own convention this year and emerged. Would you say that they look set to go into 2022, or would you say that even they still need some work to be done?
Okay. The PDP, there is a narrative, and with due respect to Mr. Ologunagba, who is with us here, there is a narrative that the PDP has pushed very hard this year, and that is that Nigerians made a mistake in 2015, and that Nigerians will make a mistake again in 2023 if they choose the APC. And they have good reason to put forth this narrative. And so I have seen the party work very hard to begin to try to present itself as the only viable alternative for Nigerians. And the convention is an example, in spite of the clashes between the big elephants, which unfortunately I am not optimistic have ended, because there will still be more court cases, there may still be more disagreements that will keep the party as splintered as we have seen it in the last several years. So I am not very optimistic that the convention has settled the major issues in the party, some of which are, again, about who has access to the honeypots, who has access to be able to share the accoutrements of office, to share the, to have patronage to dispense for whatever purposes. For me, I am not looking at the trees, I am looking at the forest. I am asking if the PDP is a more democratic party and is a party that will deliver democracy for Nigerians. And I remain uncertain. I remain pessimistic, and not just about the PDP, let me be clear, about the APC and about the other parties that are having a slight showing, even though the others are really small, so to speak. So I guess my own view is bigger than just the convention. I am looking more at whether there are any significant changes that we can point to concerning the character, concerning the trajectory, concerning the future of whatever the PDP has to offer for Nigerians.
Well, I'm pretty sure that Mr. Ologunagba will have a word or two to say about that. I'll throw it back at my colleague in Abuja to take him on. But, Madam, in terms of the choices, the decisions that have come to play, both from the ruling party, the APC, and the supposed leading opposition party, the PDP, how effectively would you say that politics has been played to the advantage of governance in 2021?
Thank you very much. It is very important that democracy is not just a system of government that allows the majority to rule, but that also gives space for the minority to also check the majority and also benefit from government and governance and from politics, so to speak. The PDP has has valiantly attempted to provide some opposition to the APC in the past year. Opposition to the extent that the PDP has often come up with, would I say, a system of opposition that has focused significantly on press statements and press releases and press conferences that states their position, their opposing position on several actions of government, condemning government actions and inactions, as the case may be, especially in terms of security challenges rising daily and on so many other fronts, so to speak. To that extent, yes, the PDP has been more visible this year than perhaps the past year. But you know, opposition is not just about the press statements. It's not just about the conferences with the press conferences. It is also that the opposition to government has a credible program to present to Nigerians that is significantly different and perhaps better than that of the ruling party. Again, I have to say that from my own critical standpoint, and I am non-partisan, I do not identify with any of these parties. And what I do is analyze politics along with my students. From this standpoint, the PDP has a lot yet to do. Nigerians do not just want a lamentation opposition, which unfortunately the APC was also very good at before they got into power. So we have seen that before, and we do not want that again. We want an opposition that presents itself both in terms of the platform and programs and in terms of the credibility of its interlocutors, the credibility of its flag bearers, the credibility of its party leadership, and presents that package to Nigerians for as an option for the future. I am not sure we are seeing that yet. And that's why I had to say that there's still a lot to be done. Opposition cannot just be reactive. It also has to be proactive. We do not run a parliamentary system like the UK and other countries that do. In those systems, the opposition have already their own shadow cabinets. We do not have that, but the preparedness to take over government is basically what I'm trying to pinpoint. Well, I am not seeing that from this PDP, I would say.
It's interesting that you mentioned shadow government, because we also understand that there is some, group of people who have put forward some kind of shadow government. You will speak to that one later. But let me see if I can take Mr. Ologunagba up on some of the issues that you have raised. Well, you've listened to Prof. talk about some of these issues. Just to quickly mention that we are still expecting a member of the APC to join us in this conversation. We're hoping that, that will happen pretty soon. But in the meantime, Mr. Ologunagba, there are those who worry that politics has not really been played to the advantage of Nigerians, as significantly as it ought to be. So the question then would be, from your own standpoint, what are the things that people may not know in the play of politics that would help them to understand what politicians have to do or go through? Okay, sounds like he cannot hear me. I don't know, Malpa, you want to help out with the question?
Well, you might need to retake your question, Ayo. We can hear you now.
Okay, good. I was asking Mr. Logagba if there is something that Nigerians need to know, the challenges that politicians may be going through that make some things work or not work to the advantage of the people that they are vying for office or are in office to govern.
Thank you very much, Ayo, and good morning. I can tell you basically that the essence of being in politics is to solve problems. And so you can't come forward to begin the issue about what problems you have. There are challenges, and you must attend to that. However, the biggest challenge for Nigeria at the moment is the fact that we have a party that came into governance with propaganda and lies, and people believed in those propaganda and lies, and then they have taken Nigerian for granted. And that has been the challenge. The challenge is not about the country or the individual people that are politicians. It's about the government that decides to come into governance by lying to people and by creating a situation that they never planned to solve, by making it look worse than it was. Now, the expectation of Nigerians is that they will have a government that will be responsive, that will provide them security, and in every sphere in the last 7 years or so, Nigerians have been at the receiving end of security. When you talk about politics, it's not so much about who runs what. It is about what do you do for the people. Nigerians are now in gloom, in pains, by reason of this incompetent government that we have. So the challenge is not us as a Nigerian or as people, because Nigerians are very, very trusting and very accommodating and understanding. But the challenge we have today is that we have a government that is not responsive, that is very arrogant, that believes it has solution to every problem, and is unwilling to listen to even the opposition when they give advice or alternatives. I listened to Professor very succinctly, and he raised so many issues, particularly in relation to opposition. The opposition is part of governance. And it is only when the government in power is willing and believes that the opposition has something to contribute in the interest of the country that you make development and you make progress as a nation. Before now, the PDP government was willing to listen to professionals, to experts. But in this government, there is no plan and there's no acceptance of anything that is beyond their own scope. And that's why we find ourselves in where we are today as a country. So the challenges is more about people in government today rather than Nigerians and what the individual politicians have. A government that comes in without a vision, without a mission, that is a contraption of strange bedfellows. That's why they don't have a vision. They don't have a mission for the country. And you find conflicting interests from different angles of government. So that is the challenge, not the individuals. So it's a government policy, it's a party that came in without a vision for Nigeria. And that's why we have the challenges we have today, particularly in the area of security. You recall that under the PDP government, the issue of security was being contained. And there was a conscious effort to make progress. However, the APC, because it came in on propaganda, brought in so many dimensions of ethnicity, of religion, and that affected the fight on that front. Today we have it, and only just yesterday, and sadly so many people have been killed in Zamfara. Now as a nation we became mute to violence, and this government does not even talk about it, they only condemn. They have no action.
What's interesting
we call on the government
my sincere apologies.
Declare its position and its relationship with perceived connection and complicity in security.
My apologies, Mr. Olugwagba. Just 1 second on some of the issues that you have raised. You also heard, Prof, you know, you listened to her, you said. You also heard her say that most of the time the opposition party is supposed to provide an alternative, a proactive alternative, as opposed to being reactive all the time. So, and there are those who have also questioned why the PDP has not played the significant role of an opposition party that it is supposed to play over time, especially ranging from some of the issues that were raised in the report that we played before this conversation started. How would you respond to Prof's position that PDP has not been proactive but rather reactive?
Well, it depends on where you look at it from. I referenced earlier when I mentioned the fact that for you to have a government that believes in the people, they must believe in opposition. And opposition is to provide alternatives. But the government must be willing and be receptive to those views. The PDP has always constantly provided solutions as an alternative to this government. And you will notice that the government has always refused to even listen to opposition. Beyond the opposition party, there are critical sectors and stakeholders in the country, particularly experts on the economy, on fiscal policies, on the issue of security. Experts, retired generals, retired security experts have provided solutions that this government refused to take in. So it's not so much about the PDP not saying a particular thing or not leading the way, but the PDP has shown consistently that it's an opposition that is worthy, so properly so called. You recall in the electoral amendment bill that is ongoing, you will recall the opposition of the PDP. The PDP led the way, particularly on the issue of the electronic transmission of results. The APC never wanted that. They never wanted that. And the PDP created the leadership in the area of opposition and saying, look, this is the will of Nigeria, and you can't bury it. As a matter of fact, it took the courage and the very courageous caucus of the PDP in the National Assembly, especially in the House of Reps, to take a walkout. That brought it back onto the bill. And to ensure that they make sure that this doesn't go through, they came back with a camouflage of the issue of party primaries. Again, that shows you the government that is unwilling to have any alternative view, and that is why we have the challenge we have today. So the PDP has been consistent in providing alternatives and critical issue, because democracy is about elections. And the election must be free, fair, credible, and transparent. The APC never wanted that, and the PDP has been the forefront to say we insist on that, and we continue to insist on that. And I'm sure that Nigerians decide and have decided that they must have credible election in 2023, and one of the pillars of that is that the electoral bill amendment must be signed into law, particularly as it relates to the issue of transmission of election results from the units up to the level of the collation centers and all the way.
Well, there are some other issues that were raised by Prof, and I am sure you would want to speak to some of them. But we'll take a short break and take a few messages. We'll return to continue. Do stay with us. Well, thanks for staying with us. We still have with us Professor Olajumoke Yacob Haliso, who is Dean School of Social Sciences, Babcock University, as well as a visiting professor, Rappaport Center for Human Rights and Justice in Austin, and member Nigeria Elections Working Group between 2016 and 2019. Well, before I go back to Abuja to talk to Mr. Olugwagba, Prof, some of the issues that have been raised, that you have raised, of course, Mr. Olugwagba has attempted to respond to some of them. But in terms of, I mean, looking across all political parties now, in terms of internal politics, what is missing? I ask this because a good number of political migration, if I can use that term, happened in 2021. And there is always one reason of, okay, it's because I'm not satisfied with what's happening in my party, so I'm going to the other party and all of that. In terms of intra-party politics, what is missing? There are those who will wonder that if we do not address that properly, well-meaning Nigerians may not want to join politics or come into politics. What's your take on that?
Thank you. On internal party democracy, because that's what we're talking about now. The first thing to say, and I want to quickly just refer to something that Mr. Ologunagba said, that democracy is about elections. I thought I heard something like that. And I wanted to react to that first, because democracy cannot be about elections. And for me, and for those of us who think about politics, that is one of the fundamental problems with Nigerian government and politics, because the major political actors have the mentality that democracy is all about the contest for power that elections are. And unfortunately, it is not. It is true that democracy is nothing without the contest for power, but at the same time, democracy is not all about the contest for power called elections. That's to say, that's to use that to foreground a response to your question, because elections are necessary for democracy, but they are not sufficient. For there to be an actual working democracy, you need other reference, an open society, freedom of expression, the freedom of association, the freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. In fact, just all the freedoms that are guaranteed, or rather expected to be guaranteed by the Nigerian Constitution, and much more than that, that government is delivering services in a transparent and accountable manner. Democracy is nothing if not what happens between elections. And so, unfortunately, our democracy has been reduced to just the activities of political parties. And that's the tragedy, if I may call it, of Nigerian elections. So we spend the years between elections preparing only for elections, and then we do not do governance. We do not take care of the citizens. We leave office the same, in fact, perhaps worse than whatever party met it. Internal party democracy is one symptom of the lack of democratic principles and values in Nigerian society. The fact that some political barons can think that they own political parties is problematic, because at the root of Nigeria's political parties' internal democracy problems is that mentality by setting very, very small groups of people who think that the party belongs to them and must always belong to them. And in Nigeria, more senior political scientists than myself who have researched on this have concluded that Nigeria does not have real political parties in the true sense of the term, comparable to the democracies that we want to mimic, that we want to be like. Because how do you have political parties for which you do not know their members? And I understand, I know that some parties, the APC and so on, have tried to sort of, to appear to remedy that, you know, by doing party registration and giving cards and all that, you know. But we have a long way to go, to the extent that The ordinary Nigerian does not perceive of the political party as the platform for the articulation, the aggregation of their political interests, because parties must not just be there to contest, they are to represent interests. So representation is not just putting people in political office and calling themselves representatives in the House of Representatives. No, representation, it must be representation of interest, and it begins at the party level. Unfortunately, as I said, many of our parties are beholden to certain big wigs, defined politically, defined financially, defined historically, whatever the case may be. And unfortunately, you would see that through the years, since 1999, and we can go further, as Nigeria has increasingly attempted to improve the electoral process, especially since 2011, these political parties, rather than expanding democracy, which is their function or the expected function in a normal democracy, these political parties work actively to reduce democratic space, beginning with their own parties. And so that means that I understand too, that was one of the concerns of the various activists, groups, and others who lobbied to impute a provision on INEC moderating primary elections in the electoral bill, because we understand that until something happens internally within parties, nothing good is going to come out of those parties. So I understand those arguments, but I am, again, pessimistic, because what political parties in Nigeria have shown us is that as you devise, as you innovate, as you seek to amend the laws, the guidelines, and the conduct of elections, the more you do that, the more the parties get smarter, in quotes, and subvert the good intentions behind the many many proposals for improving the process. So the challenge is not really to tell parties to begin to be more open about their processes of candidate selection, or to be more open about who gets the support of who, or to be more open about the entire process of how funds are gathered and disbursed and allocated for various parts. It actually goes to the foundation of the ideology that our political parties in Nigeria have. In many ways, the party system needs a restructuring, the same way that the political system itself needs restructuring, until those ideas change, that some people own the party, that ordinary citizens cannot really have a say in the party, and that politicians will fight to the death to kill the positive products of any
let us
party.
have the
There will
political
be no
actors
internal
waiting
democracy
to see if they agree with you. Well, I don't know. Let's start. Let me come to you now. We've just been joined by Mr. Andrew Abu, who is a member of the APC. You're welcome to the conversation this morning.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You've listened there to Professor Jacob Haliso. She is a professor of political science, and it would seem that, from her studies of what democracy ought to be and what we have in Nigeria, what we've practiced since 1999, there seems to be a deviation. You cannot wait to come into the conversation, but in just a moment, I'll come to you. And it looks like she is also blaming political parties for this. A very remarkable statement she made that, in spite of the creative efforts to try and expand the space, it would seem that what political parties have been good at doing is trying to shrink the democratic space. Is it a statement you agree with from your experience in your party?
Not completely. Okay, so before making any statement, I would want the prof to know that our democracy is still evolving, and there will still be issues here and there. We've been on a very stable democracy for just about 20, 21 years.
Evolving for good or for bad? Because some people will say on the outside of the political parties, it would seem that we're evolving. Are the political parties evolving as well?
Well, it's a mixed bag of a lot of things, okay? So while it might seem as if we're not evolving, positively, I mean, we've made progress. We're not where we were when it comes to, you know, political participation and the awareness that have been created, you know, over this period of stable democracy since 1999. So, and yes, it's still a work in progress. You know, are there issues? Yes, there are issues. You know, are there issues that people are working towards, you know, solving? Yes. But it might not be as straightforward as people expect it to be. Like you know, I saw her, you know, talking about actors in the political space, you know, hijacking things and all of that. Unfortunately, we have political parties where members of political parties don't even pay dues. So you just have certain people, from governors to maybe ministers in some cases, that take over these processes because they are the ones that fund the political parties. And you cannot run a political party without finances. You know, so by the time people see the need and see the importance of paying their dues and actually being a member of a political party, I think we can now start having situations where not just few people take over things that is pertaining to everybody that belongs to that political party. You know, so I know that in my party, for instance, we are gradually creating that consciousness of people taking charge of the process. Now, taking charge of the process means you have to be involved in everything that has to do with APC, ranging from paying your dues and participating in all the party activities and also having that sense of belonging, you know, because like it or not, as it stands today, I agree to some extent with what she's saying about political parties trying to, you know, maybe subvert some of the electoral processes and amendments and all of that. But, you know, it can never be watertight, you know, but it's still a work in progress. And I know that the way things are going, people are getting more aware and more conscious of a lot of things. And it's going to always continue to be different and get more difficult for people to just twist the processes.
Is that awareness going on within parties? Is that, I mean, we were seeing this big controversy over direct primaries, which has now been included into the Electoral Act Amendment Bill, which the President has declined assent to. Yeah. But some people will say that that's just a surface, that even that it was no remedy in the first instance. Part of the argument was that it was going to deepen democracy, at least within political parties. Yeah. But then people now remember that, oh, in Anambra just recently, the process that threw up the candidate was through direct primaries, and the figures which he allegedly got in the primaries, he couldn't even muster in the general election. Yeah. So there are questions as to whether it is about what methods we choose, or our sincerity to truly approach these methods with some honesty and integrity. What are your thoughts on that?
So like I said earlier, it's a mixed bag of a whole lot of things. But the people who are involved or who want to be part of political process must make conscious effort to ensure that that process is one that everybody accepts. Unfortunately, there is no process in internal democracy that can be watertight. There will always be a way for people to beat it in one way or the other, you know. But so right now,
let me ask, what's your preference as a member of the APC? What would be your preference if your party were to conduct primaries today?
Okay, so I'll go with direct primaries. I'll go with direct primaries, and the reason is simple. Direct primaries is a process that allows and enables every political member, card-carrying member of a political party, to participate. So what it means is that it is easy for you to just gather a few number of delegates and and give them certain pecs, and they will just run with a candidate that is not the choice of the general, people in the political party. So, but it is more difficult for you to start trying to bribe everybody or give everybody something, when the process involves everybody that is a card-carrying member.
But you know that as the parties are structured today, it's going to be very difficult to carry out a process of direct primaries.
Well, with the conversations and the discussions that they've been having with INEC, it is still going to be the same political parties. I mean, we've had situations of direct primaries. Even when democracy started in 1999, it was option A for primaries and a whole lot of things. So it has always been there, and all we just need to do is to find a way around these things. We can do it, and there is no process that cannot be flawed. There is absolutely no process that cannot be flawed. But I would still always stick to direct primaries because it is a more democratically inclined process when it comes to primary elections in political parties.
Well, our conversation somewhat has now moved to assessing our democracy, because some people would say ideally that is what politics should be about. How the process of government which we practice brings its dividends and impacts the lives of the people which it's set to govern.
Correct.
For a number of people now, I mean, in fact, speaking with the INEC director on voter education a few days ago, he was saying that the difficulty, the biggest challenge they have in getting the people to come out to participate in elections now is interest. It was seen that people are getting disinterested in the processes that throws up their leaders. And some people will say that oftentimes that comes up because people are unable to make the link between what is happening politically and their experience, their daily experience in life. And that's a problem, because if people are losing that connection and not seeing it, if for them politics is on one side and the people are on one side, then it would seem that our politics is failing. The question is, how do we begin to bring this connection back again and let our people know that the politicians are here for them and they ought to be accountable to them?
Thank you very much. I think this is very, very important in the conversation about how do we develop this democracy. We need to step back a little bit and go back to 1999. Yeah, I want to reference particularly the issue about the apathy in terms of voters turnout. And it's from your reporting, the Anambra experience was abysmal in terms of voters turnout. Now,
Anambra might not be typical.
No,
it might not be typical because we know that there are a number of issues around that as well.
That was the last election, so
Indeed.
it will be a basis for reference. But you need to go back to 1999 and look at the trajectory in terms of statistics. With the coming back of democracy, there was excitement. So a lot of people turned out, and voters were getting interested. Under the President Obasanjo's regime of the PDP, if you look at the statistics, the interest in participation was high. And then it went up to 2015. From 2015, if you look at the statistics, it began to calm down. And what can be responsible for this? Number one, there was a disconnect between the government, the APC government, that lied its way into government, and then failed all along. And then people could say, wait a minute.
No, sorry,
they said this to us.
Mr. Ologunagba, sorry to interrupt you. I have to interrupt you, and I have to interrupt you for good reason. In 2015 was when the APC eventually got into office. Isn't that correct? So
I was making a point.
I understand that you're making a point,
finish.
but let me quickly look at the basis of the point which you're making.
Correct.
Because if you were to look at the figures of 2015,
yes,
that's when the APC just got into office.
Yes.
So that means that the elections that were conducted that year were conducted by INEC, and you're looking at a trajectory of elections. It cannot be that the people they've not yet experienced the party. How can that be
can we move
the basis?
When I finish that point, probably you will now get the connection. I started from 1999 in terms of the interest and voter turnout. in 2015, it continued that way because there was excitement about voting. Thereafter, look at what happened at the elections following that. And that is a reflection. From 1999 to 2015, there was an upsurge in terms of improvement, in terms of statistics of people that participated in elections. Thereafter, there was excitement in 2015, okay? And there was voter turnout. You could look at the records. Thereafter, it began to come down. Why? The fact that there was a disconnect between promises made and what was delivered. And so that tells you why where we are in terms of voter turnout. And when you reference the fact that the INEC official in charge of voter education is complaining about the fact that they have concerns about voter turnout, when there are promises made and they are not kept, it disconnects people and they say, well, why am I into this?
Now,
that is true. That is the point that I'm trying to connect.
Yeah, that is true. But then should we also forget the fact that INEC increasingly has been trying to clean up its processes? We know that the voter register before now was in a terrible state.
Yes.
We know that politicians always find ways to inflate figures, but that somehow, since about 2011, there's been a drastic drop in terms of the number of people whom we see come out for, at least from the numbers that INEC reports, not from what journalists, because as far as journalists are seeing when they go out with their cameras, it would seem that the queues are long and the people still look interested in the processes. But it would seem that the figures which we eventually see at the end of the day, in relation to the number of registered voters, there are huge questions as to what is happening in that situation. How much of INEC's, will I say, cleaning up of the voter register, would you say is responsible for that?
Well, I can't speak to that because I don't have the figures of INEC. However, I do know that because that process, improving the electoral process, is a continual thing. We don't have data management in this country, and we know that's a challenge. In terms of, for instance, when people are dead and the names are still retained in the voter register, that's the challenge, because that will be there as a number. But I'm talking about the actual figures in terms of people that voted, not registered voters, from those years that I referenced. I think that's where we should focus on. That what are the issues responsible for that? If government does not deliver on promises made, then that gives apathy. That brings about apathy. And that is responsible for what we're going today. I mean, you reference again on the issue of electoral bill. We know that democracy, I mean, and I probably need to just correct the impression that the Prof had from my comment. Democracy, I said, is about elections. Yes, because that is the foundation for getting power. It is when you get into power that you can begin to implement policies and begin to deepen the areas of democracy that requires, for instance, freedom of expression, freedom of association, and that takes us back to the electoral bill amendment. Now,
just before you go with the electoral act, let me quickly throw this. I know that Ayo has a question for you.
Well, thank you, Markwe. I just wanted to ask our guests, all of our guests, this one question. Well, let me begin with Prof, and if we can make it as brief as possible. There was a statement that the governor of Edo State made recently, Governor Obaseki, saying that the politics of 1999 has expired. 5-6-year-old of 1999, they are now giving birth, and they are the ones that are supposed to come into politics now. I'm asking now, from your own standpoint, analysis and all, and to the politicians who are also on the platform, how do we begin to engage youths, more youths, who are in the largest numbers in Nigeria, to get into the political space actively?
Thank you. Thank you, Ayo. That is a vital question, very vital, because for me as a Nigerian and as a teacher, my whole life I'm surrounded by these youth. I have a big concern about what the future looks like politically based on how we are treating these youths today. And part of that is the viciousness of the current system and its exclusionary nature, by which the young people often feel that their voices not only are not heard, cannot be heard, and perhaps will never be heard. And they see that unless you're the son or daughter or family member or family friend of one of these political barons, it's very, very difficult for you to rise up through the ranks or gain experience in the political party and get to any meaningful position of being able to contest as candidates, much less having a chance at winning office, and much less having the opportunity to make your contribution policy-wise to the Nigerian system. So because we are not preparing for the future, and that future is the youth that already exists today, it's difficult to see how in the very near future they will meaningfully play a part in Nigeria's politics. So what we have that many political commentators would agree with is a gerontocracy right now, rather than a democracy. You have also what I would say is a patriarchy right now, rather than a democracy. It's a gerontocracy because it systematically makes it impossible for young people to participate in the political process beyond voting, which is their right anyway. It's a patriarchy because the
let's
system
quickly
is
have your view,
rigged.
Mr. Andrew Abu.
Yeah. Okay. Nobody's going to force you into political process. You know, we're in this space today. Nobody brought us in. We saw the need to be a part of it. You know, and you must make conscious efforts. You cannot solve a problem without being involved in the process that solves that problem. So today I would want to lend my voice to the people that are saying young people should participate more in political processes, because nobody's going to drag you from your house to come and participate. It must be a conscious effort, you know, and you must have the interest. If you don't have the interest, you will not want to be involved, you know. And there's this mentality of our votes don't count, there is nothing promised that is kept and all of that, you know. Regardless of whatever you think, the votes count, you know. Yeah, so maybe it's not watertight. Like I said earlier, you know, there's no process that is actually watertight when it comes to our democracy today, you know. But regardless of all that, you must participate. You must be a part of this process. If you're not a part of the process, the people that are in that space will run the show, and you will just have to go by what they're doing. So which is one of the biggest challenge we have today. So yeah, so you can be on social media and say what you want to say, give your comments, or make your comments on anything that has to do with governance or democratic processes and all. But if you are not part of that process, there is little or nothing you can do, which is one of the biggest problems the young people in this country.
So are you running a drive right now to get more people like yourself, and perhaps younger, into political parties?
Yes. So right now, what the APC is doing is taking the party back to the people. Okay, and only recently, sometime middle of the year, we had the Progressive Youth Conference, and it was largely to create that awareness, you know, of how important it is for young people to participate in this process.
Has it been yielding results?
Yeah, it has. It has.
Mr. Ologunagba.
Thank you very much. I think my perspective is to look at what is the role of a political party. It should be part of mentoring. A generational succession plan should be there. And that's the contrast between PDP and APC. How do you start that? There must be a foundation. How? There must be a structure of a party management. You reference your reporting here. The APC has not been able to establish a national convention to provide that platform. Today they have something called Extraordinary Convention Planning Committee, a nebulous thing that is not even recognized in law. And they've said it for 6 months. It's been there forever now. And they are still planning to have a convention in February. No determinable date. Back to mentoring. It is not enough to say that people should participate. You must create the environment for them to participate. And you notice now that PDP, consciously recognizing the fact that the future truly belongs to the youth because they are the people that vote. And if we, like the governor of Edo said, if we are not careful, they run us out of town. And how do we do that? Engage them, encourage them, put them in the space. And you notice that PDP made a very critical statement by electing a 25-year-old as the youth leader. He has a table, he has a seat at the highest decision-making body of the party. That sends a signal to the youth that, yes, this party is looking at us. They believe in us. This is one of us. He speaks our language. The APC, in contrast, has a 50-something-year-old man as its youth leader. I mean, that tells you that this is a disconnect. This party is not for the youth. PDP is for the youth. And you see that in practical terms, making effort, taking decisions to ensure that the youth can see themselves on the table. And so when decisions are being made about them, then they can listen. And that's why you see the PDP ready, set to go in that direction.
Well, I can tell you that we certainly will be having more of this conversation come 2022. It is the year, after all, preceding 2023, which is the year of the general elections. And we have been told that democracy is more than elections. Well, we have to thank our guest this morning, Professor Olajumoke Yacob Haliso, is the Dean of Social Sciences at Babcock University. She is a visiting professor at Rappaport Center for Human Rights and Justice at the University of Texas in Austin. Also a member Nigerian Elections Working Group from 2016 to 2019. Prof, thank you so much for sharing your wealth of knowledge with us this morning. We've also been speaking with Mr. Debo Ologunagba, who is the National Publicity Secretary of the People's Democratic Party, and Mr. Andrew Abu also joined us. He's a member of the All Progressives Congress. Gentlemen, thank you for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning. We take a break at this point. Nigeria has just got a new coach. Let us see what the analysts, the pundits, have to say about this in just a moment. Please stay with us.